30 disturbing encounters, 7 levels. I spent countless hours working on this iceberg to ensure it's exclusively made up of the most terrifying content humanity has to offer. We'll start with the strange and slowly work towards the most disturbing encounters on the iceberg. Let's start at the tip. Level 1. Chez Zonet. On October 9th, 2017, Chez Zonet took her daughter out for a cute day together, spending a few hours at the mall. But when they arrived at the food court, their fun day was about to take a very sinister turn. Chez had been filming the entire adventure, which she later uploaded as a 22.5-minute video, including an extremely unsettling, disturbing encounter. At the food court, Chez allowed her daughter to go play in the play area with all the other kids. But while she sat with the other parents, Chez started to notice something strange and kind of unsettling. An odd-looking man was hanging around the play area, looking right at Chez's daughter, along with 2 other little girls who were there with their mom, but no fathers. Initially, Chez assumed that maybe this man was the father of one of these children. But the more she watched her daughter play, the more she noticed that this strange man was pacing back and forth behind her, as if waiting to do something very, very sinister. And that's when Chez knew she had to step in and get out of there. Chez rushed in, picking her up and deciding that they had to go home right away. Obviously, her daughter was disappointed, but the risk and threat to her life were too significant to ignore. But when they left the mall, Chez realized that the creepy guy was following them. The man had come out of the mall just after Chez and her daughter and settled down on a bench to watch them pack up and leave. Fortunately, the man didn't do anything. He didn't make any move or threaten anybody, ultimately going in a different direction. But Chez was creeped out by him and his totally unreadable motive. It's possible that had she not moved quicker, something very, very bad could have happened here. Bear charge. On July 5th, 2020, Vahid Kosberg, a Swedish YouTuber, posted a video to YouTube. He wanted to share an experience he had on a mountaintop in Swedish Lapland with his dog Riley. Vahid had climbed to the top of the mountain for a camping adventure in the snow, but what began as a beautiful outdoor adventure of fishing and camping turned into something much, much more dramatic. At first, the video showed them enjoying the peaceful atmosphere and the environment with some calm fishing. But as the video goes on, the tone starts to shift. Suddenly, Vahid notices something strange in the distance. It's a bear, but it's much, much closer than it should be. Usually bears in this part of the world avoid humans, but they're notoriously unpredictable, and Vahid knows that. Suddenly, he realizes the seriousness of the situation, especially when the bear starts to approach the campsite. It's clear to see Vahid's growing anxiety and desperate efforts to control the situation and minimize any damage that could arise. But the bear suddenly charges at the campsite, escalating the situation from just risky to outright deadly. The bear presumably thought that Vahid or Riley was a threat to his dominance and decided to attack before he could be attacked. But Vahid's survival instincts kick in just in time. Vahid knows that loud noises and confidence signal to the bear that the human is not prey, so he grabs rocks and starts throwing them at the bear while yelling, which turns out to be just enough to stop the bear from charging. The bear retreats back into the woods, leaving Vahid and Riley to process what they just witnessed. This could have ended much differently had Vahid not thought on his feet. It wouldn't be the first or last video where an innocent camper got killed by a bear because he underestimated the danger he was facing. Stealth camper stalked. The Northwest Wind is a YouTuber known for his love of stealth camping, a kind of camping where people try to slip under the radar in their camping spots. But tonight, his video was going to go very, very wrong in an unbelievably unsettling way. The Northwest Wind was stealth camping in a rural forest in the northwest of America, trying to slip under the radar without anybody noticing that he was there, as per usual. But when he pulled out his phone to start recording, he noticed a light shining in his direction. He knew immediately. Immediately that this was not a good sign, but it was about to get worse and very, very intense very quickly. Outside his tent, he could hear people speaking, saying aggressive things, threatening him, harassing him. One of the worst possible situations for a stealth camper to have to endure.
I don't know if they could see it or not through the tent. I don't think so. I'm leaning right up against the light, but somebody's walking around out there very close to the tent.
He knew that the situation was about to turn very, very nasty if he didn't do anything. So he did the only thing he could think of to calm the situation and not escalate it anymore. He ran. Holding his phone tightly, he recorded the entire encounter, abandoning his camping gear and fleeing into the darkness. The video is too dark to make out who might be hunting him down, but the terrified desperation in his voice can't be ignored. But then, he trips and falls at a horrible moment just as the camera cuts out, leaving us unaware of what happens next. Of course, we know that he managed to get away, as he's continued to put out videos, but he's never actually spoken about who caught him, why they chased him, or really what happened after this. All of his camping and video equipment was lost, but in fleeing the scene, he may well have saved his life. Level 2. Woman in the Road. On June 2nd, 2018, around 1:46 a.m., police in Texas were on a routine evening patrol with their dash cams on. But Sergeant Scott happened to notice a very unusual situation. The car ahead of him inexplicably swerved and braked in a highly erratic way. Initially suspecting that the driver may be under the influence or maybe even having a medical issue, Scott was ready to pull over. But then he noticed that the car had actually reacted to what seemed to be an object lying in the middle of the road. It looked like nothing Scott had seen. But as his car got closer, he realized that it was not an object, it was actually a woman. Her body was just laying there on the road, lifeless and asking for trouble. Obviously, he had no choice but to pull over and check it out, hoping that she wasn't dead, or that he could do something to avoid a serious accident. Fortunately, she wasn't dead. By the time Sergeant Scott got there, he could see that she was just unconscious in the worst possible place, but now he had to find a way to get her out of the road and away from danger. After waking her up, he managed to get her on her feet and tried to move her out of the way of the dangerous oncoming traffic, but it was clear that the woman was drunk. She had been behind the wheel, unable to drive the car with any coherence. Her erratic behavior ended with the car being run into a nearby ditch before she got out and walked back to the road. But her drunkenness got the better of her, leading her to pass out in the street just moments later. It was fortunate that Sergeant Scott got there when he did, as multiple cars got dangerously close to hitting her. And if they hadn't swerved, she would certainly have been killed by the impact. Motorcyclist saves pink-haired woman. This biker was going about his business, preparing to make a delivery when he noticed a pink-haired woman rushing toward him, followed by a shady-looking and clearly agitated man. She's distressed, begging the biker to help her. Even in the footage, her distress is clear. This guy is not in his right mind. He's been chasing her for some time, and he was yelling something incoherent that was sending her into panic. It's obvious she had no clue who he is. But she had just found the one guy who was willing to help her. He could read the situation instantly, and he was not prepared to let it continue. As the man got closer to the bike, it became clear that he was on some kind of substance or drunk, totally incoherent and rambling, and a clear danger to himself and to others. He wasn't making any sense and seemed agitated by the fact that this girl had walked away from him. The biker knew exactly how to handle it. The biker told the man that she was his girlfriend. A pretty obvious lie, but an easy way to defuse the situation and shut down any aggression. The man was determined to make his point, but the biker refused to give in, calmly insisting that the man go away. And it worked. The man gave up fighting against the biker's wishes, choosing to wander off into the night rather than continue a losing battle. As soon as the man left, the pink-haired woman thanked the biker with a hug, knowing that he had likely just saved her life from who knows what kind of danger. Attempted kidnapping in alley. A security camera angled into an alley usually doesn't give much in terms of interesting footage. But this one was truly something to behold, with the owners of the camera never expecting to witness a miracle like this one. At first glance, this footage makes absolutely no sense. This young girl in the red coat seems to be waiting for something, maybe a ride or a friend or something, but suddenly she bolts off camera as if she's visibly terrified of something she just saw out of frame. When the owner of the camera first saw the footage, they had the same confused reaction. What did she see that gave her such an intense fright? So they rewound the footage back to the beginning, hoping to try and make sense of it. That's when it all fell into place. The girl had been walking down the alley alone, likely heading home, when a car suddenly pulled up beside her. Initially, she doesn't pay much attention to it, but the door opens and a hooded man in a mask goes to step out. He's obviously about to kidnap her. Something that she also sees coming. She starts to back up, clearly terrified of the situation. But just as the car is about to back up and make a second attempt at grabbing her, a stray dog rounds the corner and charges with some force. He starts aggressively barking at the man in the car, scaring him enough to send the driver speeding away. The dog didn't belong to the girl or to the building or the owners of the camera. It was truly just a stray dog that happened to arrive at the perfect moment and became the hero of the internet. Had he not shown up at all, it's seriously unpleasant to think about what this poor girl would have gone through. And it's an absolute miracle that this dog knew what to do at that moment. But not as much of a miracle as it would be if you could hit that subscribe button. Let's keep moving to Level 3. Level 3. Masked Forest People. It was January 2015, and a group of film students in New Zealand were filming footage for one of their class projects near Auckland's Parnell railway station. The footage wasn't anything particularly special, just authentic footage from the surrounding environment that they could use for their eventual project. But suddenly they noticed something strange and, frankly, unsettling. In the long grass beside the train tracks, they saw a couple, seemingly a man and a woman, both wearing creepy white masks. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, staring at them. It was a deeply unsettling thing to happen to catch on camera, and something that the students laughed off, convinced that this was a prank. But then they started moving in strange ways, as if in formation. One of them climbed onto a nearby tanker and just silently stared. Suddenly, their laughter shifted to something much more anxious and nervous, unsure whether they would be able to make it out of this situation. But the closer she got to the students, the more terrifying it became. The students couldn't keep an eye on both of them at once, and once they got too close, the group decided to leave the location entirely. On the way home, they noticed a police chopper flying toward the location they had just left. However, the real terror came later. When the students got back home, they looked over the footage they captured and found something truly horrifying. While they hadn't noticed it in the moment, they could see that the couple were seemingly holding something in their hands. And that something looked suspiciously like a gun. One of them seemed to be holding a pistol as she walked, something that's undeniable when you see the clip. It's not clear who called the cops, but this was not the first time the couple scared people in the community this way. Creepy Elder. In Mexico City, Maria, an Uber driver, arrived in a dangerous area of the city to pick up her passengers. But when she arrived, the passengers weren't ready to go, so Maria had no choice but to wait when she happened to notice an old man wandering around this empty street. After wandering around aimlessly for a while, he notices her vehicle. Suddenly, he starts walking toward the car, circling it for a little while before he escalates the situation, leaning in to stare inside right at Maria. But he doesn't seem to do anything else. Obviously, Maria was deeply unnerved by the whole thing, which is exactly why she pulled out her phone to record the weird behavior. Nobody would have believed her if she told them what she had experienced. But even though he was being exceptionally creepy, the old man didn't do anything openly threatening. He just stood and kept staring without any effort to interact with Maria. He moved around to look through every single window in the car, a seriously creepy thing to do with no clear motive. He wasn't trying to get inside, he wasn't trying to break in, he was just standing and staring as though he had been possessed by something. Eventually, Maria's passengers arrived at the location, ready to leave, but by then the old man was firmly fixed on staring inside the vehicle. Maria, of course, wasted no time. The second the passengers were inside, she sped off into the distance, leaving the old man alone and still staring blankly ahead of him. When the footage was uploaded, the internet was fascinated by the uneasy vibe of the whole clip. There's truly no rational reason for the old man to be doing this, yet he has no interest in stopping. It's highly likely he was on some kind of intense drug leading him to hallucinate something that wasn't there. But that just means Maria and her passengers should be happy that the situation did not escalate. Ghost door. Ms. Yara was minding her own business, feeding her baby on the couch while watching a movie. But suddenly, she noticed the kitchen door slowly opening on its own. Nobody else was in the house, there were no animals, no explanations for what could be happening. And that sent Ms. Yara into a serious visceral panic. Someone could jump out at any moment and possibly even kill her. Concerned that someone might have broken into her home, she stopped the movie and grabbed her phone, hoping to record whatever creepy phenomenon was happening before her eyes. The footage does pick up some creepy creaking noises that make it sound as though someone is wandering around the kitchen.
Oh my God.
It also captures the moment she begged for whoever it was to leave the house and not harm her or her baby.
Please go away. Please go away. You're not wanted. Go away. Whatever you are, go away.
But there was no immediate response beyond the sound of the ice maker in the kitchen, confirming that something was going on. Ms. Yara felt a presence in the house, and she could hear noises as though something was alive in the room just out of her sight. Eventually, she saw a dark, shadowy figure briefly appear before leaving the room entirely, as if obeying her wishes. When the spirit was finally gone from the house, Ms. Yara looked back over the footage to see if she had imagined the whole thing, but no, it was right there on camera. She uploaded the footage, hoping that people online would have experienced a similar situation, but most people who saw the footage were just shocked that Ms. Yara was brave enough not to leave her house. Sushi Potato groped in public. During a 2021 live stream in Tokyo, Japanese Twitch streamer Sushi Potato encountered 3 male fans who requested photos with her. Initially happy to encounter her fans, she agreed while positioning her hand over her low-cut top for modesty. But one man demanded she remove her hand, and when she refused, another forcibly grabbed her wrist to pry it away from her chest. The camera captured her frozen expression as the group took pictures while she stood rigid, her jaw clenched and eyes wide. She had just been harassed in front of the world. This violation occurred months after she suffered another public harassment incident. While live streaming in June 2021, Sushi Potato had sat cross-legged on a sidewalk to chat with a stranger. As they listened to music together, the man suddenly reached toward her boobs. She threw water at him and forced him to leave the scene before it could escalate further. Both assaults unfolded during street streams with the world watching, showing how bold and unashamed the harassers were. In the photo incident, the men maintained smiles throughout, treating the attack as a game, as if she had no real feelings or humanity about her. But in both cases, Sushi Potato resumes the stream immediately afterward, but her voice can be heard shaking. The video later circulated internationally in 2024, falsely attributed to India until fact-checkers identified the Tokyo location through cinema signage and verified Sushi Potato's streaming history. Bandit attack. On November 30th, 2018, Utah natives Bryant and Lauren Swenson found themselves navigating Kenya's rugged Kijabe Road.
Okay, we are about to create the brand new Game of Thrones game. Game of Thrones, King's Road.
Oh, so the main character's obviously Jon Snow, right?
Wrong. You are the main character, a mysterious figure from a new house in the north called House Time. And the story starts beyond the wall.
Beyond the wall? So the dead are coming, right?
The dead are just the beginning. This time, the fight is against something even more terrifying.
Will the battles only be in the north?
Not at all. We will explore every corner.
The last-minute route switch to avoid the blocked-up traffic on the main roads. Their Toyota Land Cruiser was also carrying fitness trainer Shiv Simani and colleague Collins Monde on a routine drive that turned lethal within seconds. As they rounded a bend, they encountered a stalled public van surrounded by 3 masked men, bandits. 2 of the bandits brandished machetes, their blades glinting in the sunlight, while a third fumbled with a handgun tucked in his waistband. The ambush site had been strategically chosen. Potholes and rough terrain forced vehicles to slow, giving attackers an advantage. The Swensons' dashcam footage showed the robbers sprinting toward their Land Cruiser, weapons raised. Bryant slammed the manual transmission into reverse, buying critical seconds to roll up the windows as Lauren shouted, "Drive." The footage shows the bandits closing in, swinging machetes at an accelerating vehicle. But Bryant shifted gears again, lurching forward through a cloud of dust as their steel blades struck the car. The police opened fire on the gang just as they escaped the scene with their lives intact. Unknown to them, they'd passed 2 armed officers minutes before the attack but chose not to stop and pick them up, saving them from a potentially deadly firefight. Kenyan media later reported the ambush occurred along a known crime corridor, though the Swensons had no prior warning. Armed robbery in NOLA. It was February 10th, 2025, and a couple was walking through the dimly lit streets of Broadmoor, New Orleans, just after 9:30 p.m. This surveillance footage captures the moment that their casual conversation abruptly stops as a hooded figure emerges from a side alley, blocking their path with a pistol aimed at chest height. The husband instantly steps in front of his wife, moving them around the front of a parked car to shield themselves from any potential injury. But the assailant, whose face is obscured by a black ski mask, gestures violently with the weapon, suggesting he's demanding something. But the messy audio makes it impossible to know.
What you want, bro? What you want? What you want? What you want? What you want?
For the next few seconds, the gunman waves the gun around until finally the husband removes his jacket and hands it over to the guy. Satisfied with what he has, the man immediately flees the scene. The police later confirmed the weapon was a modified 9mm Glock with an illegal extended magazine, meaning that this encounter could have turned deadly had the aggressor followed through with their threats. Alyssa Vanilla. Alyssa Vanilla is a solo female van lifer who uses her YouTube platform to document her daily life moving around the United States. But this encounter was far more disturbing than any other she had ever experienced. While camping in the remote desert outside Tucson, Arizona, an unidentified man in an ATV approached her campsite unannounced. He initiated a conversation by asking if she needed water, then casually revealed he wasn't a park ranger but a local resident. The man lingered despite Alyssa's guarded responses and clearly disinterest in talking to him, detailing his family life in a way that felt performative. He said his wife lived nearby and that she was welcome to come for a shower, but suggested she visit when he's home to avoid arousing any suspicion. When asked about her camping plans, he replied, "If you do stay, I'll see you again," a statement that sounded far more like a threat than anything else. Hours later, the man returned, but this time he claimed a stranger was watching Alyssa through.
Frozen in time? Don't take slow for an answer. Get Optimum 1 gig internet for only $40 a month.
Binoculars from a nearby mountain ridge. He suggested that they should relocate to an exposed area he felt was safer. But that's a direct contradiction of basic safety logic for solo campers. However, the most unsettling part of it was his description of the stalker. He said the guy was someone who checks if people have water, the exact thing he did earlier. Unnerved by the situation, Alyssa packed to leave, but the man didn't depart. Instead, he sat motionless on his ATV, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring silently and making no conversation while she dismantled her camp. Throughout the encounter, Alyssa maintained a calm demeanor while filming discreetly, capturing the man's shifting narratives and constant, unsettling presence until she could finally escape the situation. Attempted abduction. This footage was captured on the 6th train in the Bronx. The train was almost empty as it pulled into the Morrison Avenue Soundview station, but this man in the bright red jacket was obsessively staring at a young girl asleep by the window. As the train comes into the station, the man leans in, gently nudging her companion, but the person she's with doesn't move. Taking this opportunity, the man lunges forward, grabbing the girl's torso and dragging her out onto the platform, kicking and screaming. As she causes a scene, passengers start shouting to try and the man lunges forward, but the person she's with doesn't move. Taking this opportunity, the man lunges forward, grabbing the girl's torso doesn't move, and the man staring at a young girl asleep by the window. As the train comes into the station, the man leans in, gently nudging her companion, but the person she's with doesn't move. Taking this opportunity, the man lunges forward, grabbing the girl's torso and dragging her out onto the platform, kicking and screaming. As she causes a scene, passengers start shouting to try and draw attention, but the girl manages to break free and scrambles back onto the car, screaming about the man that just tried to abduct her.
What the fuck? Fuck! Fuck! Stop what you're doing! Fuck! Fuck! What the fuck? Fuck! Get the fuck up! Get up! You think he's trying to grab me? You think he's grabbing me at the train? Yo, the nigga just had to scream at him. Look!
The guy who did it doesn't even try to run. He just sits there watching as the train leaves, knowing that he was never going to get caught. Or so he thought. His name was Sonny Alloway, and when the footage went viral online, he couldn't escape it. Outside a Bronx deli, the locals recognized him and immediately decided to give him special treatment by beating him up. He insisted he didn't do anything, but police were on the scene to arrest him within minutes. Fortunately, the woman wasn't hurt, but she never formally reported the incident, leaving prosecutors reliant on the video and witness accounts. However, Alloway had a long criminal history, including prior weapons and assault charges. Carolina Judah. A young TikToker, Carolina Judah, was walking home late at night when she realized that a man was following her through the foggy streets. She got on her bus home, but the man was still following her. When she got off the bus and continued her journey home, he was right there at every step of the way. And no matter how much she tried to ignore him, he was always there and always caught on her camera. Even when she started speeding up, it seems like he's chasing her, not letting up for even a moment. But suddenly the situation escalated as he began shouting something at her. Carolina couldn't make out exactly what he was shouting, but it was clear that he was behaving very strangely, as though he had been drinking or indulging in some kind of drugs. The second she turned the corner, Carolina sprinted her way home, determined to escape him, but she was not out of the woods. 23 minutes after arriving home, she heard the doorbell at the gate start to ring. She knew that he had found her home. Terrified of how unhinged this man was behaving, she called her mom, but her mom didn't pick up. When she peered outside the window, she could see the man standing right outside her gate, as though waiting for her. Tired of playing her game, he jumped her gate and tried to open her door directly. Carolina locked herself in the bathroom, continuing to call her parents until they picked up, allowing her to finally explain the situation. Eventually, he stopped trying to get into her home, but Carolina didn't move. She was afraid that it was a trap. Her parents eventually arrived, but the man was long gone. And when the video was uploaded to TikTok, Carolina was cruelly criticized by people who argued that she should have led the stalker to a well-lit, populated area. But given that there was no place like that on her way home, her options were very much limited. There was nothing she could have done. Soaked woman. In 2022, a TikToker went on a late-night drive in a remote area of Belmont, Michigan, when she happened to spot a woman who looked like she was soaking wet on the side of the road. It didn't make any sense. It hadn't been raining anytime. TikToker naturally came to the conclusion, so she decided to keep driving. Got back and could river would miss came. It was as though her entire week had never happened. 2022, Calvin Crew climbed into Christina Spicuzza's Uber wearing a hood and mask. For the next 18 minutes, Christina's dashcam captured her trying to make casual conversation with a man who is clearly muttering incoherently. But then, he shifts to the center seat, yanks her ponytail, and presses a pistol to her skull.
Red licorice or black licorice? I say both. Oh, you think you've had liquor?
Despite the intense situation, Christina calmly begs him for mercy, explaining that she has 4 children at home. But Crew coldly replies, "I have a family too," before snatching her phone and ripping the camera from the dashboard. For the next hour, unseen by the severed cams, Spicuzza is forced to navigate deserted roads while Crew assesses her banking apps to steal her money. Detectives later reconstructed her final moments through GPS data and financial records, revealing transfers initiated under unthinkable duress. Her body was discovered 2 days later in a Monroeville wooded area, face down, with a single gunshot wound to the head and her COVID mask still secured. The murder weapon, registered to Crew's girlfriend, was never recovered and remains lost. Investigators traced Crew through license plate readers, cell tower pings, and a fingerprint he left on the discarded dashcam. His girlfriend testified he'd used her account to order the Uber and later confessed to the killing during a FaceTime call. At trial, prosecutors presented the harrowing video and testimony from Spicuzza's partner, who reported her missing when she failed to return home. On February 10, 2025, exactly 3 years after the murder, the jury convicted Crew of first-degree murder after less than an hour of deliberation. Level 4. Home Invasion. In 2015, a homeowner returned home in San Jose, California to discover that his door was open. Somebody had forced their way into his house, stealing some of his most precious valuables but leaving not too much damage. However, the investigating police strongly advised the family to invest in a security camera system to protect themselves from any future incidents that could repeat. So they took the advice very seriously, installing a number of cameras to keep an eye on the situation. Months later, in that same year, those same cameras happened to capture one of the most horrifying, stressful situations the family had ever experienced. At 10:55 a.m., 2 burglars arrived at the house, walking around the back of the property and discovering an unlocked sliding door. They quietly slipped inside, unaware that they're on camera the whole time. They immediately went to the kitchen, taking a look around for anything valuable to take with them, and also to grab some knives in case they happened to encounter an unfortunate member of the family. Like, for example, the woman who was home alone with her baby upstairs. The 2 burglars severed the phone line, ensuring that the woman cannot call for help. But that's when they heard the noises of the baby upstairs. Immediately, they rushed upstairs, following the sounds to the woman's bedroom. But by the time they got there, the door was locked, with the terrified mother inside cradling her child. Fortunately, the lock was strong enough to hold. No matter how hard they tried to break down the door, it just wouldn't give. They couldn't get inside. And even if they did, the mother had locked herself in the bathroom. But then she revealed that she already called the police before they cut the phone line. Realizing that the cops were on the way, the men fled the house in seconds. Concealing the knife, they disappeared into the distance. Police reports later confirmed that one suspect surrendered himself to authorities shortly after, revealing himself as a 17-year-old man. He was placed in custody at juvenile hall. But the homeowner, despite being shaken about what happened to his wife, was relieved that the situation was prevented and publicly praised the security cameras for making justice possible. Rachel Navarro. TikToker Rachel Navarro was in a very unusual situation in her new home. She had moved into her new apartment not long before the video, but there was a very unsettling trait that she didn't anticipate. She said she was just sitting alone watching something on her computer when she happened to notice something strange going on. The door was shaking and moving as though someone on the other side was trying to get in. When she looked through the peephole, she was convinced she could see someone on the other side, so she grabbed her phone, starting to record the entire situation as it unfolded. For hours, she had heard noises and bizarre movements going on outside. But whenever she went to check it out, she saw nothing outside. Nobody was around, and there was no clear source of the sound. When she called out, "Hello," all she could hear was the unsettling sound of someone breathing heavily on the other side. With the camera capturing every moment, Rachel decided she was going to open the door and find out once and for all. But once again, when she opened the door, nobody was there. The hallway was completely empty. The breathing and the shadow she saw through the peephole were completely gone. But the noise didn't stop.
Hold on. I'm going out there.
The video picked up the bizarre sounds of the extremely dark hallway, the strange whooshing or breathing sounds echoing through the pitch-black hallway. When she posted the video on TikTok, the responses were all overwhelmingly creeped out by what they were watching. While some were convinced that she had witnessed a ghost, others said that she was being stalked. But pretty much everybody agreed that the only way Rachel would be safe would be to get cameras, or, if she was really uncertain about what was going on, to contact the police before it was too late. Attempted kidnapping. In New York, a group of kids were playing happily outside their home. But suddenly, a car pulled up and a strange man got out, opening the trunk of his car. This unfamiliar bald man started talking to them, approaching them and inviting them into his car. These kids were immediately unnerved by the creepiness of this man, and smart enough to know that if they get into that car, nothing good is going to come of it. They have to get out of this situation immediately. So they quickly ran up the steps to try and get away from him, hoping that he would take the hint and leave the scene. But even though the kids were fleeing into the house, the man had already committed. His trunk was up, waiting. No parents were around. He was not about to give up so easily. The surveillance camera captures the moment as he calmly walks up the steps, hands behind his back. He had no idea he's being recorded as he stops outside the door, peering through the gate. The man tries to force his way into the house, pulling the gate open and entering, but the kids had already locked it, protecting themselves from this seemingly deranged predator. He cannot get in. He cannot hurt them. Angry, he tried to pull it with both hands, but the lock was too strong. These kids knew exactly who he was before he even opened his mouth. Now they were out of reach, and he was not going to get inside anytime soon. Half convinced they would just come back outside, the man hangs around by the gate, clearly frustrated and disappointed that he couldn't achieve his sick, twisted goal. He had acted too slowly, targeting the wrong kids for this to work. Eventually, realizing that the ship had sailed, the man had no choice but to get back into his car and leave the scene, presumably on the lookout for his next targets. Woman in the attic. For months, Joe, a New Yorker, was convinced he had a problem in his Fukuoka apartment. Every night, food was going missing. Rice portions shrank, snacks disappeared from sealed cabinets, milk cartons emptied overnight. He checked the windows, the door locks, and reinforced them, but it kept happening. He was sleepwalking and just couldn't remember what he was doing. But then the kitchen utensils started turning up in strange locations that made no sense. He started hearing floorboard, older clips to discover that she'd laundered his towels and organized his shoes. She'd showered while he slept 2 meters away, with steam still fogging up the bathroom mirror at sunrise. But police discovered no forced entry. She didn't break in. The woman had just taken advantage of an unlocked door a year prior. She left no fingerprints on valuables and no traces of her presence beyond a faint indentation in the closet's dust. When the police turned up for a surprise inspection, they found her nestled in the compartment. She apologized for borrowing warmth, explaining she'd timed her movements to his snoring patterns, monitoring his schedule through wall vibrations, exiting only for nighttime bathroom breaks in his sink. And Joe never had any idea. Shadow in an abandoned school. YouTuber Chris made the brave decision to go exploring in an abandoned school at night. Stories around this school had centered on some very sinister goings-on inside, including sacrifices and worse. From the second he entered the school, the darkness and the quiet was terrifying, and every step was only making his anxiety worse and worse. But he wasn't about to stop. His breathing gets more and more intense throughout the video, but suddenly the vibe changes. He's convinced he can hear footsteps, someone moving around the building not far from where he is. But whenever he turns to the sound, he can't see anything. Chris continues exploring, determined to try not to let it get him overthinking. But then, in a moment of pure coincidence, he turns around and notices a shadow moving around. Yet when he follows it, whoever there is gone. There's no door there to escape through. What he saw was impossible. There could not have been a human there, or he would have found it. Chris is so terrified by this point that he decides to climb to the roof to see more and catch a quick breath. He knows that if the police catch him, he's in trouble. And whatever is inside the school is so terrifying and unknowable that he doesn't want to hang around anymore. So he decides he has to leave. The night has scared him too much to push forward. Chris makes it out safely, but he'll never forget this encounter. When he uploaded the video to YouTube, his followers were all convinced that what Chris witnessed was not human, but a ghost or something far, far more sinister. Level 5. Woman attacked by tiger. On July 23, 2016, a family touring Beijing's Badaling Wildlife World entered the Siberian tiger enclosure in their car. But Zhao Zhang was so irritated by her husband's driving that she decided she wanted to be the one to drive immediately. Security footage shows the car slowing to a stop near the dense foliage. Without any clear warning, Zhao climbs out of the passenger side, walks around the front of the vehicle, and opens the driver's door. She's tense and clearly irritated by the argument within the car. But just as she leans into the car, a 400-pound tiger leaps from the undergrowth. It lunges at Zhao, clamping its jaws around her neck and dragging her backwards into the grass. Her husband scrambles out, shouting, but freezes as the predator vanishes with his wife. Seconds later, Zhao's 57-year-old mother, Li, bolts from the car in pursuit, ignoring the roars echoing through the enclosure. She just wants to get her daughter back. But there's a second tiger stalking the road. And as Li sprints towards her daughter's limp form, which is now partially obscured, the second tiger intercepts her mid-stride and tackles her to the ground. At this point, you can see park staff in a patrol vehicle blasting air horns and revving their engines to try and stop the chaos, but the attack continues for another 20 minutes. By the time the tigers were handled, Li sustained catastrophic injuries to her face and neck, dying before the paramedics could arrive. But against all odds, Zhao survived. She had deep lacerations, spinal damage, and a permanent facial scarring, but she was somehow alive. Unfortunately, the family had signed a safety agreement that clearly forbid exiting in predator zones, though Zhao claimed the staff failed to properly explain the rules. Zhao sued the park for inadequate emergency response and insufficient warnings, but the park faced no legal liability, citing clear negligence by visitors. Tommy Braley found. On August 25, 2017, Tommy Braley left Brewer's Bar and Grill in Sumter, South Carolina in his silver BMW 325i and vanished. For the next 7 years, his family clung to fragmented hopes.
You're not gonna believe what happened. Tell me everything. I'll show you on Monday.com. So I started the biggest initiative of the quarter. I did everything right. I used AI blocks to list all the tasks, delegate them to the team, set up all the time.
Was he alive somewhere? Why had no trace of the car surfaced? Described as the glue of his family, Braley's absence left a void, with relatives organizing searches and pleading for answers, but they got none for years. In late December 2024, scuba divers Adam Brown and Jason Sorata arrived in Sumter armed with sonar equipment to scan the waterways near Crestwood High School, a route Braley would have taken home. The team focused on a small creek off Highway 401, which had never been fully explored in the investigation. Hours of methodical scanning led to the discovery of a faint outline. A vehicle submerged 10 feet below the surface. A BMW. Authorities were immediately alerted and a tow truck hauled the waterlogged BMW out of the creek. It matched Braley's car exactly, and inside, slumped in the driver's seat, were skeletal remains. The Braley family had to wait for confirmation, which only made the anxiety even worse. But dental records confirmed the worst. Tommy had been in the car all along and had just never been discovered. But now there were even more questions. How had the BMW remained undetected in a shallow, publicly accessible creek for nearly a decade? Why had earlier searches missed it? Adam Brown later reflected on the proximity of the site to Braley's home, saying that it was a tragedy that such a short distance had separated the family from the answers they deserved. However, investigators haven't discussed potential causes of death or how the car entered the water, leaving the final moments of Braley's disappearance an unsolved mystery. Wanted man attacks young girl. This 13-year-old girl was on her way home, unaware that she was being followed by a creepy man. But the whole thing was caught on security camera, and nobody could have expected the direction the encounter took. Seeing an opportunity, the man approached the girl at her front door, claiming that he was lost and needed help finding his way home. But the girl knew something was off. She immediately rushed into the house, but couldn't move fast enough. The man forced his way into the house, determined to attack her and finish what he started. But as soon as he grabbed her, the girl fought back, slapping and scratching his face before he eventually let go. When he realized the house was full of cameras aimed right at the spot where he attacked the girl, he started to panic, fleeing the house entirely. The girl immediately called her dad, informing him of what had happened, and he rushed home to check on her. A police investigation confirmed that this man was already wanted for trying to assault a woman at a shopping mall just a month earlier. If she hadn't thought as quickly as she did, the girl would have been subjected to even more harm and never got the justice she deserved. Level 6. Vlad NCL harassed. Vlad NCL is a Russian YouTuber famous for his extremely unique social experiments. He dresses as a woman, adopting a much higher voice, and wanders the streets of New York City to see how he's treated as a woman. But one of these experiments got a little too close for comfort. Vlad was wandering the streets when a man suddenly approached him and said that she looked beautiful. Almost immediately, the man pushed into Vlad's personal space, insisting on buying this woman a drink. Even though she said no, the man refused to give up. Suddenly, he insisted that he liked this woman and wanted to get to know her more. Even though Vlad was giving off all the signals that this woman was not interested, the man continued pushing his face toward hers. And then he started looking as though he was about to do something very, very bad. No matter how much Vlad insisted on going home alone, the man insisted on going with her, even touching her without consent. Every time he went to kiss her or make a move, Vlad was forced to push back. But the guy even made it clear that her resistance and discomfort were only turning him on more. Frustrated that this guy was not listening when Vlad said to stop touching, Vlad finally pushed him with some force, catching him by surprise. But but even that seemed to just make him more in awe of this woman. Eventually, Vlad managed to get out of the situation, but he noted in the video how unsettled he was that so many people went past and did not bother to help at all, suggesting that if something went wrong, nobody would have stepped in. Murder of Myrna Salehin. On January 6, 2016, 27-year-old Wayan Myrna Salehin, a recently married socialite and daughter of a prominent Indonesian businessman, arrived at an upscale cafe to meet her friends. The CCTV footage shows one of her friends, Jessica Kumala Wongso, arriving almost an hour early, securing a table and ordering a Vietnamese iced coffee for Myrna, alongside 2 cocktails. Before Myrna and her other friend Hani arrived at 5:16 p.m., Jessica positioned shopping bags on the table, partially obscuring the camera's view of the drinks. Myrna took 1 sip of the coffee, grimaced, and allegedly said, "It tastes awful." Suddenly, within seconds, she clutched her throat, convulsed violently, and foamed at the mouth as her body slumped to the floor. Hani and the cafe staff rushed to help, but Jessica stood motionless, repeatedly rubbing her palms and inexplicably accusing the staff of poisoning her coffee. Myrna was declared dead en route to the hospital, with initial autopsies suggesting cyanide poisoning despite conflicting toxicology reports. Unfortunately for Jessica, cyanide is known to be irritating to the skin, and she was caught on camera rubbing her hands. The grainy CCTV footage became a focal point of the trial. Everything that Jessica did before her friend showed up, adjusting the bags, handling her purse, and waiting alone with the drinks, was increasingly viewed as highly suspicious behavior. Prosecutors argued she used the bags to hide pouring cyanide into the coffee. Witnesses noticed how calm Jessica was during the chaos, contrary to the behaving that takes a call of stood body sexually obscuring the 6-2 cocktail. An Jessica socialite and daughter of a prominent Indonesian businessman arrived at an upscale cafe to meet her friends. The CCTV footage shows one of her friends, Jessica Kumala Wongso, arriving almost an hour early, securing a table and ordering a Vietnamese iced coffee for Myrna, alongside 2 cocktails. Before Myrna and her other friend Hani arrived at 5:16 p.m., Jessica positioned shopping bags on the table, partially obscuring the camera's view of the drinks. Myrna took 1 sip of the coffee, grimaced, and allegedly said, "It tastes awful." Suddenly, within seconds, she clutched her throat, convulsed violently, and foamed at the mouth as her body slumped to the floor. Hani and the cafe staff rushed to help, but Jessica stood motionless, repeatedly rubbing her palms and inexplicably accusing the staff of poisoning her coffee. Myrna was declared dead en route to the hospital, with initial autopsies suggesting cyanide poisoning despite conflicting toxicology reports. Unfortunately for Jessica, cyanide is known to be irritating to the skin, and she was caught on camera rubbing her hands. The grainy CCTV footage became a focal point of the trial. Everything that Jessica did before her friend showed up, adjusting the bags, handling her purse, and waiting alone with the drinks, was increasingly viewed as highly suspicious behavior. Prosecutors argued she used the bags to hide pouring cyanide into the coffee. Witnesses noticed how calm Jessica was during the chaos, contrasting sharply with Hani's panic. Something was off. But while Jessica was sentenced for the murder, the outcome was never fully determined. The lack of clear evidence meant that it was impossible to say whether or not Jessica was guilty or not, leaving it open to public interpretation. Doreen Erbert. On Halloween night, 1984, Doreen Erbert, 8 months pregnant, stayed home with her 4-year-old daughter, Deanna, while her husband, Charles, left the house to make a quick errand. But during this time, a harsh knock at the door interrupted the evening. When Doreen opened the door, she found herself face to face with a man in a cartoonish wolf mask wielding an 18-inch machete. She screamed at him to get out of the house, pushing Deanna behind the couch to protect her. The attacker used the blade to slash Doreen's abdomen with such force that blood sprayed the ceiling and walls. When Charles returned Loris protect machete with a man in a interrupts to make a stick mask wielding an 18-inch machete. She screamed at him to get out of the house, pushing Deanna behind the couch to protect her. The attacker used the blade to slash Doreen's abdomen with such force that blood sprayed the ceiling and walls. When Charles returned later, he found the front door unlocked and Doreen dead in a pool of blood, her left hand severed. Their unborn son had been expelled from her womb, laying nearby with a severed leg and fatal chest wound. Blood soaked the floor, walls, and a grinning jack-o'-lantern on a stool. Deanna was the lone survivor, telling her dad how the masked man threatened to come back and finish the job if she spoke about what happened. The police followed a blood trail from the Herberts' home across a pedestrian overpass to William Michael Dennis's neighborhood. They found him bandaging deep cuts on his right hand. Inspecting his house, they found that his garage washing machine contained blood-stained clothes, and his truck's steering wheel was marked by smeared blood. A wolf mask, matching the one worn at a prior Halloween party and left at the crime scene, also appeared in photos inside Dennis's closet. Receipts linked him to a machete matching the murder weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. He also happened to be Doreen's ex. Dennis claimed he'd accidentally cut himself with a kitchen knife, but autopsy reports confirmed Doreen and the fetus died from chopping wounds inflicted by a heavy blade, and neighbors reported seeing a wolf-masked man stalking the Herbert Street earlier that night. When he was finally forced to stand trial, Dennis's psychiatric defense cited delusions stemming from his son's drowning 4 years earlier, which he inexplicably blamed on Doreen, but he couldn't save himself from justice. Kidnapping of Sarah Everard. On the evening of March 3, 2021, Sarah Everard left a friend's house near Clapham Common, London, at 9:00 p.m. CCTV footage captured her walking alone towards Brixton, speaking to her boyfriend on the phone for 14 minutes. At 9:34 p.m., a London bus camera recorded her standing with a police officer near a white Vauxhall Crossland with flashing hazard lights. The officer was the off-duty Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Cousins, who presented his warrant card and falsely arrested her for violating COVID-19 lockdown rules. He handcuffed her on the pavement and forced her into the vehicle. With his hostage in the car, Cousins drove 80 miles toward Kent, switching cars in Dover shortly before midnight. By 12:57 a.m., his phone was locating him in remote woodland near Ashford, where he raped Everard before strangling her to death with his police-issued belt. Security cameras later captured him at a Dover surface station at 2:34 a.m. He was buying drinks with nobody even thinking to suspect that this man had a woman's body lying dead in the trunk of his car. He transported her body to Hodes Woods, a piece of land he owned, stuffing her remains into an abandoned refrigerator, dousing it with gas and flammable materials. Over the next 3 days, Cousins maintained his routine, attending a dental appointment with his children, emailing his supervisor about his work stress, and returning to the woods to incinerate Everard's body to fully remove any evidence that could be traced back to him. On March 5th, he purchased builder's bags from B&Q, using them as weights to submerge her charred remains in a pond. It wasn't until later, when investigators traced his movements through all of these cameras, that they saw the true extent of what he did and caught him on camera disposing of Everard's phone in the River Star. Sarah's family reported her missing on March 4th. By March 10th, dental records confirmed her identity after police discovered the bags in Hodes Woods, all but proving that Cousins was responsible. To defend himself, Cousins initially fabricated a story about Eastern European gang coercion, but cell site data and DNA evidence, including his semen and her blood in his car, left no credible innocent explanation. Caught out, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping and receiving a rare whole-life sentence for the depravity of his crimes. Level 7. The Sushi Stalker. In 2004, Rie Miyoshi began dating Hideto Kozutsumi, but by 2006, she ended the relationship due to his increasingly unsettling behavior toward her. But even though the relationship was over, Hideto was far from happy with it. Over the next 4 years, Hideto's fixation only intensified. By 2010, Rie reported him to the police for relentless stalking and threatening emails, which included words like, "I'm definitely going to kill you." Yet, despite her pleas, authorities took limited action, arresting Hideto only in June 2011 under Japan's anti-stalking law. He received a suspended sentence for his actions. But unbeknownst to Rie, critical mistakes were unfolding. During Hideto's arrest, police accidentally disclosed her new married name and address while reading the charges against him. He immediately used the information to his benefit, hiring a private investigator who tricked Zushi city officials into revealing her location by posing as her husband. These breaches handed Hideto the tools to hunt down the woman he believed was his. After his release, the harassment continued at an alarming speed. Between April and November 2012, Hideto bombarded Rie with over 1,000 emails demanding monetary compensation for her breach of contract after she married another man. Increasingly scared for her life, Rie returned to the police, but they dismissed the emails as non-threatening. They were wrong. On November 6, 2012, Hideto arrived at Rie's Zushi apartment while her husband was at work. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting she might have opened the door under duress or intimidation. But as soon as he was inside, Hideto stabbed her repeatedly, killing her. With Rie dead, he hanged himself from her second-floor balcony. By the time police found Rie's phone, her inbox was filled with unanswered emails, many repeating the same demands. The tragedy exposed a series of systemic failures in Japanese law enforcement. Lax enforcement of stalking laws, careless handling of victim information by authorities, and loopholes allowing perpetrators to exploit third parties like private investigators. Rie's attempts to rebuild her life were futile because the system had no interest in protecting her. If you're a fan of disturbing encounters, you need to check out this video.
For a munch, crunch, crunch, munch, munch.
I eat little baby's ice cream. It keeps me young. It keeps me light on my feet.
Let's start with the strange and slowly make our way to the most disturbing pieces of media on the internet. I made this iceberg myself, and trust me, this gets terrifying fast. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Happy Tree Friends. One of the most well-known entries on this iceberg, Happy Tree Friends is an adult animated web series created by Aubrey Ankrum, Rode Montijo, and Ken Navarro. While I described it as well-known, infamous might be a better word for it, as Happy Tree Friends was created to be deceptively cutesy, almost obnoxious, before shocking its viewers with some of the worst, or best, animated gore you'll ever see. Yeah, Happy Tree Friends relies solely on its subversive shock value. Every episode follows the same formula of starting peacefully, pretending to be an edutainment cartoon, with their characters living their own lives, and ending with most or all of them dead. What leads to the violence and death on screen is usually something.
My name's Erwin Ralston. My parents are Donna and Larry Ralston. I think I would die if I cut my arm.
By the 5th day, he resorted to drinking his urine. Expect that dream became Aaron Ralston's nightmare. While Aaron was canyoneering at Blue John, he dislodged a suspended boulder. The 800-pound boulder smashed into his left hand and then crushed his right hand against the canyon wall, trapping him. All he had was his climbing gear, 2 burritos, less than a liter of water, and a cheap pocket knife. Over the next 4 days, Aaron went through his meager supply and made recordings about what to do next.
Climbing would probably be impossible with one hand. The blood loss and my dehydration, I think, are ruling that out. I think I would die if I cut my arm.
By the 5th day, he resorted to drinking his urine. Expecting to die, Aaron carved his name into the canyon's wall and videotaped his last goodbyes to his family.
My name's Erwin Ralston. My parents are Donna and Larry Ralston of Englewood, Colorado. Whoever finds this, please make an attempt to get it to them. Be sure of it. I would appreciate it.
But by morning, Aaron woke up with a new desperation to survive. By sheer will, he broke his own arm and cut it off using his pocket knife and pliers. 127 hours after he got trapped, Aaron was free, albeit an arm lighter. The story of Aaron's amazing escape took the media by storm. It has since been made into a movie, a sensational testament to one man's resilience. He later uploaded 20 seconds from one of his farewell videos, but only his close family and friends were allowed to view the whole thing before he moved it to a bank vault. Brandon Lee's death footage. Brandon Lee was the son of the legendary martial artist Bruce Lee. He started out acting in 1985 at the age of 21. 5 years later, he landed his breakthrough role playing the lead in an action-packed blockbuster called The Crow when disaster struck. On March 31st, 1993, Brandon was filming a scene where his character was shot. When the smoke cleared, Brandon Lee was on the ground. 6 hours later, he was dead. Somehow, the prop gun had jammed and fired a dummy bullet into Brandon's abdomen. The scene where Brandon died was allegedly destroyed at the insistence of the director. However, some of the cameramen claim otherwise. One even claims to own a copy of the death footage. This footage has never been released or seen by anyone. Robot Wars. Jeremy Clarkson is best known as a presenter on the BBC motoring show Top Gear, but his time on that show could have been cut short, literally, in one of the most shocking scenes on a different show called Robot Wars. Robot Wars was a British robot combat television series where remote-controlled robots fought each other in an arena. It picked up in 1998, and Jeremy Clarkson was the presenter for the first couple of series. His time there was short, but very memorable thanks to one shocking incident. On the second day of shooting, the losing robot was being torn to pieces by one of the in-house robots, ironically called Dead Metal. As Dead Metal was slicing into its opponent, a circular metal blade broke away and flew across the room at 200 miles per hour. It missed Clarkson's scalp by 2 inches and ended up embedded in a solid concrete wall. While the incident was recorded, no images or footage of the incident have ever been publicly released. It might still be lurking somewhere in the BBC's archives. Level 2. I feel fantastic. I feel fantastic, far from what the name implies, is one of the creepiest videos to ever surface on the internet. The mysterious video was uploaded in 2009 and features a strange woman called Tara singing a song. From the toneless voice to her bizarre movements, everything about the video was unsettling. But the creepiest part was a strange pan zoom to a field just before the video ended. The mysterious video gathered its own conspiracies. Tara was either a serial killer or created by a serial killer. The clothes she was wearing were for her victims. The shot near the end was the burial plot of her victims. In reality, Tara was an animatronic robot created by a mysterious man named John Bergeron. Tara wasn't the only android he had made. There was Robo, Annette, and Valerie. In 2003, he started posting videos of Tara singing. The plan was to have her do live appearances, but Tara's musical talent was more horror than songbird. So, John resorted to selling music videos of Tara singing on DVD for $11. Nothing else is known about this enigmatic creator. The last time he talked about his robots was back in 2009. But the legend of Tara lives on to scar a new generation of YouTubers. Led Zeppelin's sex tape. With 8 consecutive UK #1 albums and 6 #1 albums in the US, Led Zeppelin are one of the best-selling music artists of all time. Like many bands, Led Zeppelin had their fair share of groupies. When these groupies mixed with their crazy parties, crazy things happened. And the summer of 1969 was no different. Led Zeppelin and another rock band, Vanilla Fudge, were touring together. Both bands were booked into Seattle's Edgewater Inn, a hotel that had guests fishing right from their windows. After a spot of fishing, they caught a 2-foot-long mud shark, but they had no plans of eating the fish. That night, they all gathered in a room, band members, roadies, and groupies alike, all high on pot and booze. That's when some crew members, including the Zeppelin's tour manager, Richard Cole, showed up with the mud shark, a camera, and camera lights. He immediately got one of the groupies to strip and tossed her on the bed. Then they whipped out the mud shark and started slapping her around with it, leaving red scars all over her body. When they were done with that, they cut up the shark and stuffed the pieces into the redhead's butt and her hoo-ha. The incident was kept hushed until 1971 after Frank Zappa made a song about it titled The Mud Shark. There are also rumors that Vanilla Fudge's singer Mark Stein had taped the entire thing, but the film never saw the light of day and the woman has never said a pip. The Timothy Treadwell tape. Timothy Treadwell was known as the Grizzly Man. He spent 13 summers filming the bears of the Katmai National Park in Alaska, co-wrote a book on bears, and appeared on TV shows like the Discovery Channel and The Late Late Show with Tom Snyder. He even got invited to schools across the US to educate kids about bears. But Timothy had no business advising anyone on grizzly bears. He got dangerously close to them, touched them, and even played with bear cubs. Basically, everything you should not do with a grizzly bear. Timothy was warned several times about how close he allowed bears to get, but he never complied and got even more reckless. In October 2003, Timothy decided to go visit the park. October wasn't the best time to be around bears. They were getting ready to hibernate and were increasingly aggressive. Nevertheless, he went there with his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard. It would be a fatal decision.
Come here and camp here. Come here and try to do what I do. You will die. You will die here. You will die here.
Awaken to a world of wonder in Final Fantasy XIV Online. Take it easy and play your way. Whether it's fishing, crafting, or taking on quests. Play solo, or team up with your friends. Final Fantasy XIV.
They will get you. I found a way.
On the afternoon of October 5th, they checked in over a satellite phone. But the next day, the two were dead, and Timothy's body had been torn apart. They had been mauled to death by the very bears Timothy loved. The bear was also put down. But the most macabre find was still to come. A video camera with an agonizing 6-minute audio of the couple's final moments. The audio suggests Timothy was outside the tent when he got attacked by the bear. Annie tried to save him by attacking the bear, but got attacked too. The tape ran out over her horrifying screams. Several recreations of the tragic audio have been made, but the actual one has never been released to the public. Siegfried and Roy tiger attack. Siegfried Fischbacher and Roy Horn were a pair of German-American illusionists and entertainers, popularly called the Tiger Kings. The two met on a cruise liner in 1959 after Siegfried asked Roy, who was working as a waiter, to assist him during a show. Over the next 4 decades, the two would go from performing on cruise lines to nightclubs across Europe before finally making it to hotels and casinos in Las Vegas, where they made it big after landing a deal to work at the Mirage. Their magical extravaganza, which featured rare white tigers, lions, and elephants, would gross $500 million in just 1 decade, breaking box office records. Then, everything came crashing down during a show on October 3rd, 2003. It was Roy's 59th birthday, and he was performing in front of a live audience with Manticore, a 400-pound white tiger. But something happened that night, and the animal would end up biting into Roy's neck while dragging him to his cage. It would take 4 men and a fire extinguisher to get the tiger off Roy. Roy suffered a stroke, a severe spine injury, and massive blood loss. Though he survived, his time in the limelight had come to an end. In a rare show of mercy, Manticore was deemed blameless and not put down. The entire attack was recorded by the casino, but they never released the footage to the public out of respect for Roy's privacy. Colin Scott's tragic death at Yellowstone. The best-known park in the U.S. is the Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. But one of the things that makes Yellowstone truly special is that it is located on an active supervolcano. As a result, it has several geothermal areas, including the Norris Geyser Basin. The Norris Geyser Basin goes up to 199 degrees, and it is so acidic that dipping in one would be like a swim in battery acid. Hence, the many, many warnings to not go dipping in and to stay on the path. As of June 2016, there had been 21 scalding deaths there. Colin Scott's death would make it 22. That fateful day, Colin and his sister Sable were hiking through the park looking for the perfect place to have a soak. Sable had her phone out and was recording as they walked off the Norris Geyser boardwalk and headed to the prohibited area around the Norris Geyser. This was the last picture he posted on Facebook before tragedy struck. Colin had bent down to check the temperature of a hot spring when he slipped and fell in. Sable tried to get him out, but couldn't. There was also no cell phone service in that area. She had no choice but to leave him and get help. By the time the park officials showed up, it was too late. Colin was not moving. They could only see portions of his head, torso, and hands, and it was clear he had suffered severe thermal burns. Enough for them to determine he was dead. Unfortunately, they couldn't even recover his body because the area was too volatile, and there was a storm rolling in. When the officers returned the next day, Scott's body was gone, dissolved in the hot, acidic spring. All that was left of him were his wallet and a pair of flip-flops. Sable's phone captured the horrifying moment Scott had slipped and fallen in, as well as her valiant efforts to rescue him. But park officials have refused to release the video or any description of it. 2022 UEFA Champions League Final. The annual UEFA Champions League is one of the most prestigious football competitions in the world, and the finals are the icing on the cake. As you can imagine, there's a large buildup of fans around the stadium before the game starts. And usually, organizers are prepared for it. But the 2022 UEFA Champions League finals were far from usual. The finals were originally supposed to be held in Russia, but following their invasion of Ukraine, the venue was moved to the Stade de France Stadium in the north of France. Fans of Liverpool and Real Madrid trooped to the stadium on May 28, 2022 to support their teams, but they had no idea the shocking experience they were in for. There were thousands of fans and not enough cops and stewards, so ticket inspections and checks took forever. Pretty soon, the number of those getting into the stadium exceeded the crowd trying to get in. By 6 p.m., many fans were boxed in and the crowd kept building up. So they abandoned the checkpoints and let everyone through. But there was nowhere to go. The turnstiles and gates had been shut. In the confusion, there were pickpockets who made off with mobile phones and tickets. Some tried to get into the stadium by climbing fences. That's when the riot police stepped in. But not to stop the assaults and robberies. They pushed fans with batons and riot shields, which only increased the confusion. That's when they brought out tear gas and pepper spray, using it indiscriminately on men, women, children, and even police officers and stewards. The match kicked off late with over 15,000 fans still outside. Some didn't get in till halftime, and many fans who had purchased legitimate tickets and gotten mugged were turned away. The match ended with a 1-0 win to Real Madrid. But after the match, the chaos continued. When fans leaving the stadium got into the streets, they were surrounded by a large group of men armed with machetes, knives, bars, and bats. They ended up attacked, mugged, stabbed, and beaten up. Many women and girls got groped, and at least one disabled woman was sexually assaulted. By the time police showed, the attackers melded in with the fans and dispersed. Then, the police turned on the fans. A total of 238 people had been injured. An inquiry was opened, and it got out that the CCTV footage of the violent altercations had been erased, while many of the ones outside the stadium had been deleted. Totally lost to time, like it never happened. Level 3. Cavallese Cable Car Disaster. On the afternoon of February 3rd, some didn't get in till league finals were far from usual. The finals were originally supposed to be held in Russia, but following their invasion of Ukraine, the venue was moved to the Stade de France Stadium in the north of France. Fans of Liverpool and Real Madrid trooped to the stadium on May 28, 2022 to support their teams, but they had no idea the shocking experience they were in for. There were thousands of fans and not enough cops and stewards, so ticket inspections and checks took forever. Pretty soon, the number of those getting into the stadium exceeded the crowd trying to get in. By 6 p.m., many fans were boxed in and the crowd kept building up. So they abandoned the checkpoints and let everyone through. But there was nowhere to go. The turnstiles and gates had been shut. In the confusion, there were pickpockets who made off with mobile phones and tickets. Some tried to get into the stadium by climbing fences. That's when the riot police. The annual UEFA FA champions only increased. A total of 2 Chandler Seagraves and William Rainey were deployed at the airbase in Aviano, Italy. They decided to have some fun and took out a plane flying faster and lower than standard regulations while taking videos of the scenery. This wasn't the first time. A week earlier, they had received a formal warning for flying too low after a training takeoff. But this time, disaster struck when they cut the cable. The plane's wing and tail got damaged, but they made it to base. As soon as they landed, they immediately destroyed the videotape recording they had been making and didn't tell anyone they had it. Initially, all 4 officers were charged, but only the pilot, Captain Ashby, and his navigator, Captain Schweitzer, faced trial. But both men were acquitted. The other 2 officers were given immunity in exchange for a full confession. That's when they found out there was a videotape and it had been destroyed. After a second trial, they were both found guilty and dismissed from the service. Only Ashby received prison time, and it was just 6 months, barely a slap on the wrist. Families were later compensated at $1.9 million per victim. Noah's Ark, the complete cut. Many movies have made their mark in history. The thin blue line for exposing a corrupt justice system and getting an innocent man released. The Wizard of Oz for being the first movie ever to use Technicolor. But when the 1928 film Noah's Ark made the list, it wasn't because it was great. In fact, it was described as a complete bore by the New York Post. No, what really set Noah's Ark apart was an insane decision made during the production of the movie that made it to the screen. A scarily realistic flood scene where extras were fighting for their lives. Those who watched the film in November 1928 might not have known it, but the scene was not acting. The extras really were fighting for their lives. During the filming, the director Michael Curtis decided a fake flood wouldn't sell the kind of desperation he wanted in a film that was supposed to be the greatest picture ever made. So, without telling the 7,500 extras on the set his plans, or even finding out if they could swim, Michael dumped 600,000 gallons of water from a tank on them. The results were catastrophic. The monumental force of the water slammed the extras into the concrete floors. For hours, they struggled for air as they fought for their lives. In the end, 3 extras drowned, and hundreds of them were injured. One man's leg got mangled so bad he had to get an amputation. That wasn't the only unhinged thing that happened on set. Lead actor George O'Brien was meant to be hit with a collapsible spear but was stabbed with a real one instead. Again, Michael Curtis encouraged him to keep acting and even got a close-up of the wound for the film. The first premiere of the film included unsettling shots of the actual drownings. After receiving harsh criticism, the drowning shots were removed. It has never been seen again. But the scene with the extras struggling against the flood remains. The side of Louis Conrad in To Catch a Predator. To Catch a Predator was a wildly popular American reality television series hosted by Chris Hansen that was aired between 2004 and 2007. Predators would be lured into the undercover house where they would expect to meet minors they'd been chatting with online. Instead, they were confronted by Chris Hansen, a room full of cameras, and exposed on national TV. One of the most memorable predators ever caught was a man called John Kennelly, who showed up at the undercover house stark naked. The very next day, he was trying to meet another of their decoys at a McDonald's. Several predators were taken off the streets, but the show came to a dramatic end in 2008 after one predator pulled the rug from under them. It started when a 19-year-old college student called INXS00 on MySpace started chatting with one of the volunteers posing as a 13-year-old boy and sent him a sexually explicit photo of himself and some porn pictures. They later found out that this was no college student. It was Texas Assistant District Attorney Louis Conrad. They tried luring Louis to the undercover house, but he didn't show up. Over the next few days, Louis stopped messaging the 13-year-old and deleted his MySpace account. On the 5th of November, the cops showed up at his house with a search warrant for soliciting a minor by computer. Dateline crew were also on the ground. The plan was for the crew to take recordings as his electronic devices were seized. But Louis refused to open the door, and SWAT was called. They stormed into the house looking for him, but the minute Louis saw the police, he said his last words and shot himself in the head. An audio tape of Conrad's final words and the fatal gunshot was recorded by police and obtained by Dateline NBC, but it was never aired. In 2007, Conrad's 3 phone calls to the 13-year-old were uploaded to YouTube.
Hello?
Hey, is this Will?
Yeah.
Hey, Will, this is Luke. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
What are you doing?
Nothing. What's going on?
While it was never confirmed whether Conrad's suicide caused the show's cancellation in 2008, it had a hand in it. Lucifer Rising. Lucifer Rising was a 1972 underground short film directed by Kenneth Anger. Kenneth had offered Bobby Busalile the part of Lucifer after seeing Bobby at an underground festival playing his guitar and licking sweat off a woman's breasts. Filming started in 1966, but it was slow and the two kept butting heads. A year later, they went their separate ways and Kenneth accused Bobby of stealing his camera and the footage for the film. But that wasn't Bobby's last crime. It all started in 1968 after Bobby met a freshly released Charles Manson. The cult leader drew Bobby in, and he was soon a part of the Manson family, a bunch of mostly young women who were attracted to the communal and hippie lifestyle. The family would jam together, camp together, and even kill together, all under the careful watch of Charles Manson.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. The very first of their victims was Gary Hinman. Charles Manson sent Bobby with Susan Atkins and Mary Brunner. And 6 days later, Gary's body was found in his home. He had been tortured and stabbed multiple times in his heart. Bobby was sentenced to death, but it was later reduced to life. But his time in the limelight wasn't over. By this time, Kenneth was doing a reenactment of the lost Lucifer Rising film, but he was having issues getting a soundtrack. Enter Bobby. Bobby wrote Kenneth from prison and offered to compose the soundtrack. He got instruments from a prison teacher and put together an orchestra with other inmates. The resulting 44-minute soundtrack was put in The Lucifer Rising and released in 1980. By then, Kenneth had stopped accusing Bobby of stealing the original footage. Instead, he blamed the theft on unknown youths. The only surviving footage from the original cut of Lucifer Rising was included in a 1969 film called Invocation of My Demon Brother. Daniel P. Duke's Tilikum Incident. Tilikum, nicknamed Tilly, was a male orca captured in Iceland in 1983 when he was 2. His body being carried around. Several co-workers noticed how happy she looked. They had no idea what was coming. That Monday morning, Christine showed up at work looking a lot more cheerful than her usual self. She told coworkers that she wanted to read the news before the morning segment. That had never happened, but she went ahead. They were a small station and fewer people tuned in. Over the next 8 minutes, Christine covered 3 national stories. She was on the 4th story, a shooting at a restaurant, when the reel jammed. That's when Christine said her last words. In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts and in living color, you are going to see another first, attempted suicide. But this was no attempt. Christine pulled out a gun, put it to her head, and pulled the trigger. She would die later that day. Just as planned, Christine was immortalized as the first person to die by suicide on live television broadcast. The footage had been taken by the police, but her family would get a court order against the news station to stop them from ever releasing the footage. Level 4. Mont Blanc Tunnel Fire. The Mont Blanc Highway Tunnel is a highway route that goes right under the Mont Blanc Mountain in the Alps and links France to Italy. It was opened to traffic in 1965, and for 35 years there hadn't been a single fatal accident. But all that changed on the morning of March 24, 1999. Just before 11 a.m., a truck hauling margarine and flour caught fire and quickly burst into flames. At that point, 50 people were in the tunnel, 38 of them on the French side. Within minutes, a thick smoke began to spread, and several drivers had no choice but to roll up their windows and hope for rescue. The weather condition that day meant the air was going from the Italian side to the French. It allowed a lot of the drivers on the Italian side to get away, and 12 of them to get rescued. But those on the French side weren't so lucky. Visibility was non-existent, and tires and fuel tanks were exploding, sending shrapnel into the air and spreading fire to other vehicles. 30 minutes after the fire started, a toxic mix of carbon monoxide and cyanide filled the air. Both drivers who hoped to get rescue from the car and the people who had run out were soon overwhelmed with the fumes. Even people who tried to rescue paid for it with their lives. One of them was a fireman, and the other was Pierlucio Tinazzi, an Italian security guard. Pierlucio had gone into the smoke on his bike to try and help, but he would die. Even his bike melted in the fire. The fire lasted for 53 hours, melting the asphalt and causing some parts of the tunnel to collapse. It would be a week before the tunnel cooled down enough to recover the bodies. 39 people died in the fire, most of them suffocated before they burned. All their bodies were reduced to ash. The cause of the fire is still being disputed to this day. For a long time, many thought the intensity of the smoke had covered any CCTV footage of the tragic incident, but in 2012, a French documentary of the fire was released. It had several clips from the CCTV, but moments like the lorry exploding, the vehicles attempting to turn around, and people running were not included out of respect to the victims' families. It is unlikely that the full tapes will ever be released. Columbine Basement Tapes. April 20th, 1999 was supposed to have been a regular school day at Columbine High School in Colorado, U.S., but the day would end in terror after what was, at the time, the deadliest high school shooting in the U.S.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window. Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am? Yes. Okay.
After a year of planning, high school seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Claybold had showed up to the school armed with guns and bombs. They would murder 12 students and 1 teacher and injure many others before turning their guns on themselves. They left behind several journal writings and home videos. In the videos, the shooters bragged about how many they would kill, showing off their guns while referencing the massacre, figuring out how they would hide the weapons in their clothes, counting down to the massacre, and making goodbye messages to their families. Those tapes came to be known as the basement tapes. The two dreamt that their videos would be viewed far and wide, but that dream died with them. Very few people viewed them before they were locked away and destroyed, never to be seen again. The 1955 Le Mans disaster. 24 Hours of Le Mans is the oldest endurance-focused sport car race in the world. It had been run annually near the town of Le Mans in France. Unlike regular races, where the winner is determined by the shortest time, the winner of the 24 Hour of Le Mans is the car that covers the greatest distance in 24 hours. The race started in 1929, but it wasn't until 1955 that the first major catastrophe was recorded. But it didn't start that way. The crowd had been ripe with excitement. Ferrari, Jaguar, and Mercedes-Benz had all won the races in previous years and shown up with new and improved cars, but the tracks hadn't been designed for cars going that fast. Nonetheless, the circuit was packed with almost 300,000 fans when the race kicked off. But 2.5 hours in, disaster struck. Austin Healey driver Lance Macklin swerved to avoid hitting the Jaguar of Mike Hawthorne, who was braking hard. That split-second decision would lead to dire consequences. Mercedes driver Pierre Levay was able to signal the driver behind him to slow down just before he struck Lance. The Mercedes flew over a barricade, slammed into a concrete stairwell, and immediately split apart. The heaviest parts of the car, the engine block, radiator, and front suspension, flew straight at the crowd, crushing unsuspecting spectators. The bonnet flew through the air, decapitating spectators by the second. Then the fuel tank exploded, showering them with white-hot flames. All this happened in less than 10 seconds. The gruesome spectacle left more than 120 injured and 83 dead, including race car driver Pierre Levay, who had been immediately tossed out of the car and died on impact. But what happened in the aftermath of this disaster was just as horrifying. Le Mans decided to continue the race even with the wrecked cars still on the track. The Mercedes team was in the lead but withdrew from the race as a sign of respect to the victims. The Jaguar team, led by Mike Hawthorne, who had caused the entire accident, continued and would go on to win the race. While various footages of the race were captured, files related to the official investigation of the disaster were classified until 2031. Even today, 69 years later, the question remains about what exactly they have to hide. Otto Trian. Otto Trian was a woolly dinosaur kangaroo that quickly became one of the most recognizable children's mascots in Estonia during the 1990s. It appeared on dairy products, had its own brand of chocolate, and produced 2 cassettes. Otto Trian was known to host contests and appear at zoos, foster homes, and elementary schools across Estonia. The reason this character got so popular was because it was the main character in an Estonian children's TV show created by Venno Lusar and Hindrek Masik in September 1993. By 1995, the show got so popular that it would do a tour in the United States. But it all came crashing down in 1999, and this widely popular show disappeared, barely leaving a trace behind. Some say it was hidden away because of the mired lives of the show's creators. 2 years before the show ended, the show's producer and manager Tonu Paavo caused a fatal traffic accident that would claim 2 lives. A 37-year-old mother and her 5-year-old daughter. TV3 canceled Otto Trian in 1999 and wiped their very existence from their archives. But Tonu Paavo wasn't the only black mark on the show. For 5 years, the show's creator, Venno Lusar, had worn a mascot to play the part of Otto Trian, but in 2019 the mascot was pulled off and his secret life was exposed. Venno was accused of sexually abusing a 10-year-old girl and having child pornography. A search of his laptop uncovered 19 images and 4 videos. He was sentenced to 5 years probation. Today, all that remains of the 5-year series are 2 recipes, 2 short clips, and 2 guessing games. There are no known VHS releases of the show. Marilyn Manson's groupie tape. In the early 1990s, Marilyn Manson was one of the most infamous rock bands in America. The band was so infamous that 3 U.S. states would pass laws banning them from performing at state-owned venues. Many times there would be protests to stop the group from performing. They were notorious for singing about sex, violence, drugs, and anti-religious ideas, all while wearing crazy clothes and makeup and doing bizarre things on and off stage. One of those involved a short film called Groupie. It was made by the lead singer the band was named for. The film was shot in one night with a camcorder sometime between 1996 and 1998 at a house party Manson had hosted. Though he had gotten an actress to play the part of a groupie, the other guests had no idea they would be part of the film. It starts with Manson performing a sex act on one of his bandmates, and then the groupie steps in. She was made to do disturbing things like drinking pee, or that's what Manson says. The actual film was never released. Manson says his manager, Tony Ciulla, had taken one look at it and warned him to never release it, or else he would end his music career and be thrown in jail. In the end, Manson took the middle ground and released a very small part of the film at the end of his 1998 live video album. The clip was of a woman getting tortured by Manson. That was all anyone knew about the video till 2022, when Manson went on a show and talked about it.
I won't go into the details of this film, but I made this movie that I had intentions of putting onto my home video, not thinking that it would offend my own.
So what was the scenario? You gotta slow down.
It was like a party at my house.
It was a real party, and you were taping with a real camera?
I said a girl's gonna show up, and then something's probably gonna go wrong, and you guys just roll with it.
But to this day, only Manson, his lawyer, and his manager have ever seen the video. But many think it was all a hoax to keep up with their edgy image. Timothy Piazza's hazing death. Hazing, a childish ritual of forcing people to go through humiliating and abusive acts before having them join a club. But hazing isn't always fun. Many times it has led to injuries, near-death experiences, and even death. One of the victims was 19-year-old Timothy Piazza. In 2017, Timothy was a sophomore at Pennsylvania State. He'd always dreamt of joining the renowned Beta Theta Phi fraternity. But his dreams would come crashing down on February 2nd, 2017. Timothy was made to have 18 drinks in 82 minutes, everything from vodka to beer and even wine. Soon after, Timothy was stumbling around. That's when he fell down the basement stairs and was knocked out. Over the night, he would stumble, fall, and lose consciousness on several occasions. When one of the chapter members suggested calling 911, he was roughed up and ignored.
I kind of lost it. I was screaming and yelling. I was saying, we need to take him to the hospital. We should call an ambulance, dial 911.
The following day, 12 hours after his initial fall, one of them noticed Timothy looking like a corpse, and they finally called an ambulance.
What's going on today?
We have a friend who's unconscious. He hasn't moved. He's cold extremity. It's probably an ambulance.
But not before cleaning his body and dressing him up. Timothy had suffered serious injuries and would die the next day. When the police showed up to get the CCTV footage, one of the chapter members deleted it before handing it over. But the police would later recover 13 hours of Timothy's final moments. While some of it was shown during the trial of his frat brothers, the video will probably never be released out of respect to Timothy's family. Level 5. Blair Witch Kidnapping. In March 2002, 5 friends from Flint, Michigan filmed themselves kidnapping 19-year-old Danielle Taylor. They handcuffed her, blindfolded her, and bundled into a car. Then they drove to an open field nearby where they continued to threaten her before placing her in a grave and telling her she was being buried alive. After dumping a few shovels full of snow into the pit, they made a slicing motion against her throat. But it wasn't real. They had been making a movie.
Oh my God. You want to do the roll? Let's get the cast.
It was supposed to be in the found footage style that had first been used in the 1999 American horror film The Blair Witch Project. But one of them was not in on it, Danielle Taylor. She managed to get the footage and report it to the police. 5 days later, they were facing charges of kidnapping and assault. At trial, they insisted that Taylor had been in from the beginning, and in several parts of the film, she looked like she was playing along. But other parts were just too distressing to ignore. In the end, they had to pay fines and get probation. That same year, a documentary around the prank, kidnap, and the
No one understands me. If I actually told people how I'm feeling, they would think of me differently. That is a lie that I told myself.
Trial was released. It had snippets from the actual video, but the full video has never been seen. It remains buried in the police vault in Brummel University. The phone call from room 211. On the morning of April 16th, 2007, Seung-Hoo Cho, a student at the Virginia Polytechnic in Virginia, USA, killed 2 students in a dormitory. He returned to his room to change out of his bloody clothes, remove his hard drive, delete emails, and mail a package to NBC News. The package contained an 1,800-word incoherent statement, videos that made references to the Columbine shooting, and disturbing pictures. Then, 2 hours after the first murders, he walked to Norris Hall, locked the main entrance with chains, and left a note claiming that a bomb would go off if anyone attempted to remove them. Then, the shooting began, but many students had no idea what was going on. Down the hall, in room 211, 21-year-old Colin Goddard called 911. Over the next 10 minutes, the 911 dispatch would capture the next horrifying moments. Desperate students barricading the door and hiding, the gunmen pushing through and shooting at the students, their screams as they got hit. Then, silence as he retreated to another room to continue the shooting. A few minutes later, Cho was back, executing students who had been injured. A few moments later, just before SWAT entered the building, there was a single bang. Cho had shot himself. He had killed 32 people and wounded 17. The deaths of 11 of them had been caught on that one 911 call made from room 211. But the call had been deemed too graphic for public viewing. One of the responding officers described the call as one of the most gruesome things she had ever heard. It has never been released to the public and probably never will be heard. Officers indeed wounded before rooms. The horror shooting began. Wreckage contrived. 16th, 2007. Seung-Hoo Cho, a student at the Virginia Polytechnic in Virginia, USA, killed 2 students in a dormitory. He returned to his room to change out of his bloody clothes. On the morning of April 6th, the phone call from room to 11. On the morning of April 16th, 2007, Seung-Hoo Cho, a student at the Virginia Polytechnic in Virginia, USA, killed 2 students in a dormitory. He returned to his room to change out of his bloody clothes, remove his hard drive, delete emails, and mail a package to NBC News. The package contained an 1,800-word incoherent statement, videos that made references to the Columbine shooting, and disturbing pictures. Then, 2 hours after the first murders, he walked to Norris Hall, locked the main entrance with chains, and left a note claiming that a bomb would go off if anyone attempted to remove them. Then the shooting began, but many students had no idea what was going on. Down the hall, in room 211, 21-year-old Colin Goddard called 911. Over the next 10 minutes, the 911 dispatch would capture the next horrifying moments. Desperate students barricading the door and hiding, the gunmen pushing through and shooting at the students, their screams as they got hit. Then, silence as he retreated to another room to continue the shooting. A few minutes later, Cho was back, executing students who had been injured. A few moments later, just before SWAT entered the building, there was a single bang. Cho had shot himself. He had killed 32 people and wounded 17. The deaths of 11 of them had been caught on that one 911 call made from room 211. But the call had been deemed too graphic for public viewing. One of the responding officers described the call as one of the most gruesome things she had ever heard. It has never been released to the public and probably never will be. Joanna Dennehy. Joanna Dennehy is one of 3 women in the UK ever to be told that she would never be released from prison. She was a sadistic serial killer who murdered 3 men to have fun in March 2013. She lured one of the men over, the other was a housemate, and the third was her landlord. Joanna dumped their bodies in ditches outside Peterborough. She even dressed the bodies of one of the men in a black sequined dress before dumping his corpse. Her final 2 acts were on April 2nd. She ran up to a random man and stabbed him repeatedly. 9 minutes later, she ran to another man, stabbing him, and stole his dog. That's when the police caught up with her. During the trial, Joanna came up with a daring escape plot to break out of jail. She and 2 other inmates would kill a female guard and steal her prison keys. After that, they would get her prison keys and cut off her fingers. The fingers would be used to bypass the biometric system in the prison, and they would get away scot-free. No one told Joanna that the first rule of an escape was not to leave a paper trail, so she wrote out everything in her diary. A diary that prison guards would find after being tipped off about their escape plan. The serial killer was promptly moved to solitary confinement, and she would stay for 2 years. As for the diary, it was confiscated and has never once been leaked. Andrew Blaze tapes. In the early hours of June 8, 2017, employees at a Weis supermarket in Pennsylvania, USA, were stocking and closing the store. For the night. One of them was 24-year-old Randy Stair. He had worked there for 7 years. On the side, he was a cartoonist and had a small YouTube channel called Pioneers Productions. But all that came to an end on the morning of June 8, 2017. Armed with 2 shotguns, Randy barricaded the exits of the store and shot and killed 3 of his coworkers, shot up the entire store, and turned his gun on himself. Before he showed up at work, he had uploaded a final video titled The Westboro High Massacre. He also sent out links to multiple files and videos of his plans to his Twitter account just before the shootings. The videos showed him talking about his fascination with the Columbine High School massacre, firing targets at a shooting range, showing off his guns, and planning the massacre. The next day, Randy's account was suspended on Twitter and YouTube, and many of the files were lost for a long time before someone found and uploaded some of them to archive.org. But several videos are still missing and presumed lost. Asia McGowan's YouTube tragedy. Asia McGowan was a 20-year-old woman who had attended Henry Ford Community College. When she wasn't busy with school, she posted vlogs on her YouTube channel where she did comedy skits, dancing routines, and just out having a good time. Asia wasn't the only student at Henry Ford Community College who was also a YouTuber. There was 28-year-old Anthony Powell. Anthony was a controversial YouTuber whose channel got suspended several times because of his angry, hostile rants against atheism and black women. In his later video, he was expressing suicidal thoughts and even mentioned that he had a shotgun. Several of his followers reported to the police department, but no one did anything. By April 2009, Asia and Anthony were headed for a fatal encounter. It started with Anthony going on another crazy rant against black women. Not long after, he started stalking and bullying her online, leaving hateful comments on her channel. On April 6, 2009, Asia made a video addressing the hate comments. Exactly 1 week later, Anthony found Asia in an empty classroom and shot her before turning the gun on himself. After the murder, Anthony's YouTube channel was shut down and a lot of his videos were wiped off the internet, including the video of his final rant. All that's left is the audio.
We make videos on YouTube about y'all, telling y'all what's up and telling y'all the truth about yourselves. Y'all get mad at us and talk about why we not persecuting black men. The f you gonna persecute us for? There's no reason for us to do it.
Asia's channel stayed up for 2 years before it got hacked and later terminated. 3 of her videos would later be found and uploaded by another YouTuber, but the rest of her content is lost forever. Level 6. Man in the Chair. On June 2nd, 1985, San Francisco police were at a hardware store after they got a report on shoplifting. When they showed up, the crook was long gone, but his partner was trying to pay for the item. When they asked for his ID, they noticed that he looked nothing like the photo, and the ID belonged to a missing man. They took the man in for questioning. He admitted he was Leonard Lake, and the shoplifter was Charles Ng. That's all he said before taking a cyanide pill and slipping into a coma. A police investigation would lead them to a remote cabin where they found the burned remains of at least 12 people, along with the IDs of several missing people. They also found a bunker with a hidden door that led to a tiny windowless cell with 6 rules pinned to a wall. But most damning of all were Leonard's diaries and 2 videotapes. The horrifying videotapes showed Leonard and Charles telling the victim they had the choice to either be kept alive as Lake's sex slave or be brutally raped, killed, and buried. Whatever choice the women made, they were put in the tiny windowless cell where Leonard and Charles filmed their victims while having their way with them before finally killing them. Many more videotapes were believed to have been made because Leonard referenced a number of them in his diary, but they were never found. It's believed that his ex-wife took them away before the police showed up. One of the surviving tapes showed Leonard in a chair going into macabre details about keeping a slave in a jail till he needed her.
I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want.
During the trial, Charles' lawyer released snippets of the videos to sway the public into believing Leonard was the leader and Charles had just gone along for the ride. It didn't work. Charles was sentenced to death. He is still on death row. So far, no other tapes have been released, and based on the horrific things on them, they probably never will be. Crossbow cannibal footage. On June 22, 2009, 41-year-old Stephen Griffiths lured Suzanne Blamiers over to his apartment in Bradford, West Yorkshire, by pretending to be a photographer. Not long after she entered his room, CCTV footage would capture Suzanne running out of his room and down the corridor in terror. She was followed closely by Stephen holding a crossbow, who soon caught up with her. He killed her right in the hallway with an arrow to her head. Then he dragged her back to his apartment. Holding a crossbow down the corridor, CCTV pretending to be a photographer. Not long after she entered his room, CCTV footage would capture Suzanne running out of his room and down the corridor in terror. She was followed closely by Stephen holding a crossbow, who soon caught up with her. He killed her right in the hallway with an arrow to her head. Then he dragged her back to his apartment. That's when he spotted the CCTV camera that had been recording everything. After dragging Suzanne's body into his apartment, Stephen flipped the bird at the camera and went back into his home. For a year, his secret was buried in that camera. Then a caretaker going through the CCTV footage found it and called the police. Stephen immediately confessed to the crimes and gave himself the name the Crossbow Cannibal. Turned out, he had done a lot more than kill one woman. He had also eaten parts of her body. And she wasn't even the only one. 2 other women had met the same fate behind those walls. Stephen was sentenced to life in prison. While the full CCTV footage has never been released, parts of it were broadcast on TV, including a CCTV camera showing Stephen trying to lure another victim in just an hour after killing Suzanne. Ricardo Lopez, he had buried at the apartment in the hall by running and 1-year-old cannibal footage. On June 22, 2009, 41-year-old Stephen Griffiths lured Suzanne Blamiers over to his apartment in Bradford, West Yorkshire, by pretending to be a photographer. Not long after she entered his room, CCTV footage would capture Suzanne running out of his room and down the corridor in terror. She was followed closely by Stephen holding a crossbow, who soon caught up with her. He killed her right in the hallway with an arrow to her head. Then he dragged her back to his apartment. That's when he spotted the CCTV camera that had been recording everything. After dragging Suzanne's body into his apartment, Stephen flipped the bird at the camera and went back into his home. For a year, his secret was buried in that camera. Then a caretaker going through the CCTV footage found it and called the police. Stephen immediately confessed to the crimes and gave himself the name the Crossbow Cannibal. Turned out, he had done a lot more than kill one woman. He had also eaten parts of her body. And she wasn't even the only one. 2 other women had met the same fate behind those walls. Stephen was sentenced to life in prison. While the full CCTV footage has never been released, parts of it were broadcast on TV, including a CCTV camera showing Stephen trying to lure another victim in just an hour after killing Suzanne. Ricardo Lopez. In 1993, an American stalker called Ricardo Lopez developed an obsession with Icelandic singer Björk. This obsession went on for 3 years, with Ricardo writing about Björk in a diary he kept. He wrote numerous harmless fan letters to her, even though she never responded. Then in 1996, Björk started a relationship with English musician Goldie. That's when Ricardo lost it. The thought of Björk with a black man drove Ricardo over the edge. He stopped writing in his diaries and switched to videos. Over 9 months, he would make 11 video diaries in his apartment, each of them about 2 hours long. This culminated in his planning a murder-suicide on September 12, 1996. Ricardo mailed a letter bomb rigged with sulfuric acid he'd made to Björk's residence in London. Then, he recorded a final video diary explaining why he was killing her. The video ended with Ricardo shooting himself when Björk's song I Remember You finished playing. There were 2 problems with Ricardo's plan. Björk had already ended the relationship he hated so much days earlier. In addition, her mail was vetted before appearing at her home. The letter bomb was tracked to a London postal sorting office and was safely detonated, and Björk was alive and safe. Weirdly enough, the full set of Ricardo's videotapes, including the suicide, are quite available to the public and even on YouTube. Turned out the Hollywood Police Department's records unit had sold copies discreetly. While a lot of these YouTube channels have since been taken down, the videos are still out there on the internet. As for his diaries, those have never been released. Level 7. David Ray Parker's torture tapes. On March 22, 1999, Albuquerque police in the USA responded to a 911 call to find a woman covered in blood with a slave collar around her neck. Her name was Cynthia Vigil, and she had just escaped from her abductors, David Ray Parker and his girlfriend, Cindy Hendy. Cynthia had been chained up in a trailer for 3 days and tortured with whips, medical and sexual instruments, and electric shocks. But she wasn't the first woman they had done this to. Between 1957 and 1999, Ray kidnapped about 4 to 5 women a year. The women were held captive in a soundproof trailer he kept behind his home. David called it his toy box, and it was stocked with sex toys, torture devices, and syringes. There, Ray would rape the women he abducted. Sometimes he invited friends, his girlfriend, and even his daughter, Glenda Jessie Ray. Sometimes he got his male dog to rape the victims too. After a couple of months, David would drug the victim with barbiturates in an attempt to erase their memories of what had happened before abandoning them by the side of the road. He recorded every single kidnapping in a diary. Several women came forward with the same story of getting abducted, and it always started with an audio tape. David had made the tape back in July 23, 1993. In it, he detailed the horrific things he planned to do to his victims, and the women were made to listen to all of it. It was so depraved and graphic that it was never played in court and has never been released to the public. But in 2022, a transcript was released. David was sentenced to 224 years in prison, but died of a heart attack a year into his sentencing. Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka's tapes. Between 1987 and 1990, Paul Bernardo was the Scarborough rapist. During that time, he would be involved in the rapes and attempted rapes of at least 16 women. Then in 1990, he met and married Karla Homolka. The two would be involved in the rape and murder of at least 3 minors, including Karla's younger sister Tammy. They flew under the radar for 2 years, looking like every average couple. Then Karla turned on her husband after a domestic incident. She told the police that he was the dreaded Scarborough rapist. She also told them that Paul had forced her to participate and made videos of her with them. After searching the house for more than 2 months, they found one tape of Karla performing oral sex on an unconscious girl, just like she had said. Eventually, they offered Karla a plea deal, 12 years to testify against her husband. All of Canada would come to know this as the deal with the devil.
Je veux pas que le monde pense que je suis quelqu'un de dangereux qui vont faire quelque chose à leurs enfants.
The tapes were finally uncovered a year later. Apparently, Paul had gotten his lawyer to hide them, a trump card against his wife's stories in court. He wasn't wrong. The tapes clearly showed that Karla was an active participant in the rape and assault of the girls. In one particularly damning tape titled The Fireside Chat, Karla and Paul engaged in foreplay while they went over the details of what they did to Karla's dead sister the night they killed her. There were even tapes of the two taking turns raping a girl Karla had lured to their home. In 2001, Canadian authorities destroyed the heinous tapes, but transcripts still exist even though they have never been released to the public. Japanese cannibal audio. On June 12, 1981, French authorities discovered suitcases containing the dismembered remains of a woman in a public garden. Not long after, they arrested Issei Sagawa. The Japanese student had lured his classmate Renee Hartvelt to his apartment, shot her, and cut her body into pieces. but Renee's murder was no accident. At Issei's apartment, the police found the rest of Hartfeldt's body in the fridge, a rifle, and an audio tape. The tape recorded Renee's last words before she was shot. There were also 39 photos that Issei had taken at each stage of cutting up her body. But Issei wasn't just a murderer. He admitted to having sex with her corpse and eating several parts of her body. Some he cooked, some he ate raw. He even slept with her remains beside him. The 32-year-old man had become obsessed with the beautiful Renee and wanted her all for himself, literally. Yet, Issei got away with this heinous crime. He was held for 2 years while they decided if he was legally sane to stand trial.